Daphne Nolan stabbed her fork into the dry salmon, trying not to roll her eyes as Nolan Prescott launched into yet another story about his yacht. And then told the captain, if we can't dock in Monaco, we'll just throw the party in St. Tropez instead, he said, tossing his designer blonde hair like it was rehearsed. She forced a smile. Wow, sounds spontaneous. She didn't know what was more painful, the overpriced food at the rooftop restaurant, or the fact that Nolan kept calling her babe like they were already in a relationship. Daphne glanced at her phone screen, the time ticking painfully slow. She'd only agreed to this date to get her stepmother off her back. You need someone refined, Daphne, not a barista or a driver, a man who understands your world. Her world, as if money had ever made her feel like she belonged anywhere. She pushed her chair back. I need some air. The moment she stepped onto the sidewalk, the cold Manhattan wind hit her like a slap. She didn't care. She started walking, heels clicking fast, needing a break from hollow conversations and even hollower men. Babe, where are you going? Nolan called after her. Haven't told you about my vineyard yet. She didn't answer. A block down, she passed a small food truck with a crooked chalkboard sign that read, "Don't be sad, get a hot dog." Behind it stood a man with dark tousled hair, sleeves rolled up, flipping a sausage with one hand and bouncing a giggling little girl on his hip with the other. "Gina, if you squirt ketchup on my shirt again, you're going to owe me a new one," he said, laughing. The girl, maybe 5 or 6, squealed. "But you said your shirt only cost $5, Daddy." "Yeah, well, inflation." Daphne surprised herself by laughing out loud. The man turned, caught her eye, and smiled, not the practiced kind her dates gave. This one was warm, real. He leaned slightly toward her. "Rough night." She blinked, that obvious. He nodded toward her heels. "You're walking like someone just told you dinner was gonna be 3 courses of ego." She cracked up. "That's actually exactly what happened." He grinned and handed her a paper-wrapped hot dog. "On the house, you look like you need it more than I need $3. She hesitated, then took it. "You don't even know me." "Neither does the guy you just ditched, apparently." She laughed again, biting into the hot dog. It was messy, greasy, and absolutely perfect. "I'm Jackson Keller," he said, wiping his hands. "That's Gina. She's the real boss around here." Gina waved her ketchup-covered hands proudly. "Hi." "Daphne," she said, licking mustard from her thumb. "And you just saved me from the worst date of my life." Jackson leaned on the counter, studying her. "You don't look like someone who usually gets saved by hot dog guys." She shrugged. "Maybe I've been hanging out with the wrong guys." He laughed. "Well, I make a mean chili dog, and I'm a world-class balloon animal artist on Saturdays. So, kind of a full package." "I'm impressed." "You should be." She liked him. A little too much, which was a problem. Because no one ever saw the real her, not after the tabloids, not after her father died and left her with billions, a cold penthouse, and a stepmother who treated her like a business asset. She didn't want to lie, but she didn't want him to treat her like Nolan did either. So she said nothing. Instead, she leaned on the counter and said, "Tell me more about these balloon animals." Jackson's eyes lit up. "Well, there was this giraffe that looked more like a worm, but Gina said it had character." "I gave it to my teacher," Gina added proudly. Daphne stayed for almost an hour, laughing until her cheeks hurt. People walked past them on the sidewalk, but she didn't care. For once, she wasn't a billionaire or a headline. She was just a girl eating a hot dog with a kind man and his ketchup-covered daughter. When she finally said goodbye, Jackson handed her a napkin with his number scribbled on it. "In case you ever need a rescue again." She smiled. "Thanks, Jackson." He paused. Hey, Daphne. Yeah, hey. You deserve better than that guy, just so you know. She walked away with hot dog grease on her fingers and a flutter in her chest. And for the first time in a long time, she felt seen. Daphne ducked into the lobby of her building with the collar of her coat pulled high against the wind, her heels echoing off the marble floor. Henry, the doorman, tipped his hat. She gave him a nod, distracted, her fingers still curled around the napkin in her pocket. Inside the elevator, she stared at her reflection in the mirrored walls. Her hair was slightly windblown, there was a tiny smear of mustard near her wrist, and she still had a trace of ketchup under one nail. And yet, she looked more alive than she had in weeks. Her penthouse greeted her with silence cold, perfect, and overly curated. The scent of fresh eucalyptus from the weekly flower delivery lingered in the air, but it felt sterile, like everything else here. She tossed her heels aside and padded barefoot across the marble floor. She paused at the kitchen island. A crystal bowl filled with imported fruit sat untouched. Beside it, a bottle of aged wine with a handwritten note from her stepmother. Dinner with the Devereaux next Thursday. Wear something timeless. Daphne crumpled the note and dropped it into the trash. The napkin with the number? She tucked it into the side of her sketchbook, right between two pages filled with rough designs garments she'd never shown anyone, not since Parsons. Not since her father's accident pulled her into a world she never asked for. The next morning, she left the penthouse before sunrise, slipping into a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a simple braid. No driver, no security detail. She took the subway. The city was groggy and gray as she stepped onto a quieter block in Brooklyn. She spotted the food truck before anything else, parked beneath a budding tree with its awning half rolled down. Jackson stood at the open window, pouring coffee from a dented thermos into a paper cup. "Didn't expect you to actually call in a rescue," he said, handing her the cup. "I didn't," she replied. "I just wanted another hot dog." Before 8 in the morning. With coffee, I'm full of contradictions. Jackson raised an eyebrow but didn't push. Gina's got a dentist appointment. I'm flying solo today. Daphne leaned against the truck. You always open this early. Only when rent's due, he said, which is, always. She smiled and took a sip. The coffee was too strong, slightly burnt, but somehow it suited him. You do this full time. Yes, he said, adjusting a lever on the grill. Left a corporate job 3 years ago. Too many meetings, not enough hot dogs. No regrets. Plenty, but I'd rather burn my own food than my soul. Daphne blinked. That wasn't something people said lightly. She liked that he did. He continued, unbothered. I'm building something for Gina, a future that's not tied to a desk or someone else's clock. So you're a philosopher with a grill. Exactly, with mustard on my apron. He glanced at her sideways, then nodded toward the sketchbook poking out of her tote. You draw. She hesitated, sometimes. What kind of stuff? Clothes, designs. I used to be serious about it. What stopped you? She looked away. Life, expectations. He didn't press. Instead, he flipped a hot dog with a pair of tongs and said, Well, if you ever want to design uniforms for a luxury wiener operation, I know a guy. She laughed, but the tension in her shoulders didn't quite leave. I might take you up on that. A customer approached, and Jackson turned his attention to the order. Daphne watched him work quick, efficient, warm with the man who ordered a plain dog and a soda. There was something grounded about him, something completely unfiltered. She wasn't used to people like that, not anymore. After the customer left, Jackson leaned back against the counter. You ever think about doing it again? Designing? Sometimes, but it's complicated. He nodded. Gina draws too, mostly cats in space, but I told her if it makes you happy, chase it. Daphne studied him. You're not what I expected. Good, Jackson said. Expectations are overrated. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. The early morning light filtered through the leaves, casting gold flecks across the sidewalk. A pigeon strutted past like it owned the block. Finally, Daphne asked, "Do you ever take a break?" Jackson shrugged. "I run the truck Tuesdays through Saturdays. Sundays are for Gina. Mondays are for laundry, which she thinks is a punishment." She sounds smart. She's terrifying, he said with mock seriousness. Don't let the dimples fool you. Daphne hesitated. Would it be weird if I asked to help out today? Jackson blinked. You want to work the truck? I've never served hot dogs before. Could be a character building experience. He grinned. You'll wish you never said that after your third ketchup explosion. She tossed her jacket onto the back counter and rolled up her sleeves. I'm ready. For the next few hours, they worked side by side. She learned how to wrap a dog one-handed, the right way to press the bun so it didn't fall apart, and how not to underestimate the speed of a child with a loaded mustard bottle. By noon, she was laughing as she wiped her hands on a towel, her braid loose and frizzy from the heat. Jackson tossed her a bottle of water. You're a natural, he said. I'm a disaster, she replied, catching sight of herself in the side mirror of the truck. Disasters make the best stories. She looked at him, heart thudding harder than it should. Haven't had this much fun in a long time. He studied her, something shifting in his gaze. Maybe you're just finally doing something real. She wanted to tell him everything right then. But how do you explain that you live in a penthouse with a private elevator and your last name is attached to half the buildings in Midtown? So instead, she said, thanks for letting me crash your morning. He nodded, anytime. She lingered a moment longer, then climbed down from the truck. As she walked away, Jackson watched her go, puzzled and intrigued. She didn't see it. But he was already falling. Rain tapped steadily against the windows of the modest corner laundromat, the kind of place with flickering lights and broken vending machines. Daphne sat on a cracked vinyl bench, folding tiny socks into a neat pile. Across from her, Gina was perched on a stool, legs swinging, sipping juice from a plastic cup while humming a tune that had "Frozen" written all over it. Jackson emerged from the row of dryers, arms full of warm clothes, his t-shirt clinging slightly from the humidity in the room. He dropped the load beside her and grinned. You really didn't have to come help with laundry. Daphne shrugged, folding a faded hoodie. Owed you for letting me ruin your lunch rush yesterday. You didn't ruin anything. You increased sales. One guy came back twice just to ask if you were single. She arched an eyebrow, and you told him that he was out of his league. Daphne laughed, then caught herself. She'd been doing that more often lately. Laughing, smiling for no reason, feeling like something inside her was loosening after years of being locked tight. Gina tugged on her sleeve. Do you know how to braid unicorn hair? I've never met a unicorn, but I'm confident I could figure it out. Good, Gina said solemnly, because that's important. Jackson sat beside her, watching as Gina skipped off to examine the gumball machine. She likes you. Yeah, Daphne said softly. She doesn't like most people, especially not ones who wear shoes that click. I wore sneakers today. I noticed. A pause settled between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. I've been thinking, Jackson began, his gaze fixed on the spinning dryer across the room. You show up here like you've got nowhere else to be, but something about you says otherwise. Daphne folded a t-shirt slowly. What's that supposed to mean? You're not like the people in this neighborhood. You walk like someone who's always running from something. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers smoothed the fabric in her lap, buying time she didn't have. "I'm not running," she said finally, "just choosing where to stand." He looked at her then, really looked. "Is there someone waiting for you to come back? A boyfriend? Husband?" She shook her head. "No, just expectations." "Those can be worse." "They usually are." Gina returned with a handful of quarters and a wide-eyed expression. "Daddy, there's a puppy outside." Jackson stood instantly, looking out the fogged-up window. A shivering golden retriever sat near a lamppost, its leash trailing on the ground. "I'll grab it before it runs into traffic," he said, already heading for the door. Daphne followed him outside, the rain drizzling steadily now. Jackson crouched and gently clipped the loose leash to the handle of the gumball machine to keep the dog in place. "No collar," he muttered, rubbing the dog's damp head. Daphne crouched beside him. "He's friendly, probably got loose from somewhere nearby. We'll keep him at the truck until someone claims him." "You're taking him in." "What's one more mouth to feed?" A car honked nearby, and the dog flinched. Jackson steadied it with a calm hand. "You always do this?" she asked. "Take in strays?" He gave her a sidelong glance. Only the ones who look like they don't know where they belong. Her heart tightened. He hadn't meant it the way it landed, but it landed all the same. Back inside, Gina had already named the dog Pancake and was feeding it crackers from her backpack. Later that afternoon, the food truck was back on its usual corner, with Pancake curled up beneath the counter and Gina coloring in a plastic chair behind them. Daphne stood at the window, handing a customer their order, her ponytail damp from the rain. Jackson wiped his hands on a towel and leaned against the side of the truck. "You sure you want to keep showing up like this?" "Why, am I scaring away business?" "Just wondering what you're looking for." She looked out at the street, where people bustled past without looking up. "Something that feels real." He didn't press, just nodded and turned back to the grill. That night, after Gina was tucked in at the apartment above the laundromat where they lived, Jackson stepped out onto the fire escape. The sky was clearing, stars faint behind the haze of city light. He pulled out his phone, opened the browser, and typed her name. He'd only caught a glimpse of it on her driver's license earlier that day, when her wallet had slipped from her bag as she reached for a napkin. She hadn't noticed. The search results loaded in seconds. Daphne Nolan, heiress to the Nolan estate, estimated worth over $5 billion, fashion school dropout, tabloid darling, last seen at the Met Gala. He stared at the screen, unmoving. The woman folding socks beside him today was the same woman splashed across headlines for her father's fortune and a scandalous breakup 2 years ago. He let out a breath slowly. She hadn't told him, but she'd shown up again and again. Not as the billionaire. Just as Daphne. And now he didn't know what scared him more, the fact that she lied, or the fact that he didn't care. Not even a little. Jackson tugged the edge of the canopy lower, shielding the food truck window from the misty drizzle that had started just after sundown. The line had thinned, and Gina was curled up on the bench seat inside, dozing with Pancake's head resting on her lap. Daphne was carefully stacking napkins near the register, but her movements were slower than usual. He watched her, unsure how to begin. "You knew," she said finally, without turning around. He straightened. "I didn't go looking for it, not at first." "But you found it." "Your wallet fell open. I saw the license. I recognized the name. Had questions." She turned then, her expression unreadable. "And you didn't ask." "I figured if you wanted to tell me, you would." Daphne stepped out from the truck, pulling her jacket tighter. Jackson followed her, pausing beneath the awning as she walked a few paces into the quiet street. The sidewalk was slick, reflecting the amber glow of the street lamps. She stopped near the curb, arms folded, eyes on the passing cabs. "I didn't lie, I just didn't offer the whole picture." "I get that," Jackson said, "but you've been here every day for weeks, folding laundry, serving hot dogs, letting Gina cover you in glitter glue. That's not nothing." She glanced at him. "You didn't treat me like I was some headline or a trust fund project. You made me feel normal." "You're not normal, Daphne," he stepped forward. "You're better." She gave a short laugh, bitter at the edges. "That's not what the world thinks." "I don't care what the world thinks. Care that you show up without cameras or excuses. Care that Gina lights up when she sees you. Care that when I look at you, I don't see the money, see the woman who made my daughter believe unicorn braiding was a real job." She looked away, lips pressed tightly together, but her eyes betrayed her shining full. "I didn't want to drag you into my world," she whispered. "What if I want to be in it?" She exhaled, the sound shaky. "It's complicated." "So is mine. I've got a daughter who thinks I'm half superhero, half vending machine. I run a business with a flat tire and a grill that overheats if someone breathes on it wrong. I've got $28 in my checking account and a dog who just ate half a crayon, but I still want you in it." Daphne turned fully then, her expression finally cracking. "You don't know what comes with me, Jackson." "Then show me." She stepped closer, searching his face. "I've never brought anyone into that part of my life, not since my father passed. Everyone just saw the money, not the grief, not the guilt, just the headlines." "I'm not everyone," he said. "No, you're not." Her voice caught just a little. "I want to know you," he said. "All of you, not just the girl who makes balloon swords with my daughter or dodges mustard with a smile. I want the woman who's been holding herself together for too long. The one who hasn't let anyone in because she's terrified they'll walk out the moment it gets complicated." She stared at him, stunned. Then slowly she nodded. "You'll need a suit," she said. He blinked. "For what?" "My stepmother's auction gala. It's at the Nolan Foundation this weekend. She's expecting me to show up with a date." He hesitated. "You sure you want your world to see me in it?" "I want you there because you're the only one who doesn't care how much I'm worth." He gave a half smile. "I'll have to borrow a tie from my neighbor, but I'll be there." That weekend, the Nolan Foundation glittered like a cathedral of excess. The ballroom dripped with chandeliers, and champagne flowed like water. Guests mingled in couture gowns and custom tuxedos, murmuring about art while eyeing one another's portfolios. Daphne stood at the top of the stairs, her hand resting lightly on Jackson's arm. He looked devastating in black, the borrowed tie slightly askew, but his posture unshaken. "Is it too late to pretend I'm your driver?" he muttered. She smiled. "Not unless you plan to valet the Rolls parked outside." They descended together, and the crowd turned. Murmurs rose. People recognized her and then noticed him. Jackson didn't flinch. He walked beside her like he belonged there. Her stepmother approached with a glass of something gold and expensive. "You brought a date." "I did." The woman's gaze swept over Jackson, lips pursed. "And you are." "Someone who knows how to make her laugh when the world stops trying," he said calmly. The silence that followed was brief but satisfying. Her stepmother turned away without another word. Daphne leaned close. "That was perfect. I rehearsed it on the subway." They danced once, slowly, far from the center of the room. He held her hand like it was something precious, not because of what it had inherited, but because of what it had given. "You're not afraid anymore," he said. "No," she whispered, "I'm not." The night ended with them stepping out onto the balcony, the city stretching below in a glittering sprawl. Jackson took her hand again. "I don't have a penthouse," he said, "but I've got a daughter who already thinks you're magic. and a dog who's probably eating my couch right now." She laughed heartful. "Then let's go home." They left the gala early, not because they didn't belong, but because they'd found where they truly did. Together, the apartment above the laundromat smelled faintly of melted crayon and dryer sheets. Daphne stood barefoot in the kitchen, one hand balancing a bowl of cereal and the other holding Pancake's leash, while the dog scratched lazily at the door. Sunlight poured through the window, catching the dust in the air like tiny flecks of gold. Jackson emerged from the hallway with a sleepy Gina wrapped around his shoulders like a koala. "She refuses to wear socks that aren't glittery," he said. "We might have a diplomatic crisis on our hands." "Those are the stakes I'm trained for," Daphne said, setting the bowl on the counter. "I'll negotiate." Gina peeked out from behind his shoulder. "Only if I get rainbow cereal." "Done," Daphne replied, "but you have to promise not to feed any to Pancake." The little girl rolled her eyes as Jackson set her down. "He only likes the purple ones." Jackson leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, watching the two of them. "You know, you don't have to keep staying here." "I know. You've got an entire building with your name on it. Probably a dozen places with walk-in closets bigger than this whole apartment." "I'm not interested in closets right now," she said. "I like doors that don't lock behind me." He nodded slowly. "You're not pretending anymore." "I haven't been since the gala." A silence settled, more reflective than uncertain. She crossed to him and touched the edge of his t-shirt, her fingers brushing the soft cotton. "You're not afraid of what I come with." "I've seen it. I've seen worse. What scares me is pretending like none of this matters when it does." She took his hand, threading her fingers between his. "I want to build something that's mine, not inherited, not branded, just real. We could start with a truck." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking about expanding. A second one, maybe a stand in the park on weekends. With your designs, it could be more than a food truck. It could be ours." She blinked. "You want to go into business with me?" "I want to build a life with you. And if that starts with hot dogs and glitter socks, I'm all in." She pulled him down, her lips brushing his. "Then so am I." Later that week, the new stand opened with a ribbon. Gina insisted on cutting herself using glitter-covered safety scissors. Daphne's sketches were brought to life in the form of bright, playful uniforms and a custom logo, a dancing hot dog wearing a crown. Pancake's paw print was stamped at the bottom corner like a signature. Lines formed, not from curiosity, but from people who'd heard about the stand that made real food with heart. Jackson grilled while Daphne worked the register, laughing and chatting with customers like she'd been born to do it. Gina handed out balloons shaped like dinosaurs and declared herself the official vibe manager. Midway through the day, an older woman in a camel coat approached the stand. "You're Daphne Nolan," she said, not unkindly. "My husband used to do business with your father." Daphne paused, then nodded. "Yes, I'm his daughter." "I read about you in the papers, said you vanished." "I didn't vanish," Daphne said. "I just found a better view." The woman smiled, then ordered 2 chili dogs and left a generous tip. By the end of the afternoon, Jackson was wiping down counters while Daphne counted bills in a small tin. Gina was asleep under the counter, curled up with a blanket and Pancake using her as a pillow. "You could have been anywhere," Jackson said, stacking napkin dispensers. "Running a foundation, flying to Paris, buying islands." "I don't want any of that." He looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "What do you want?" She stepped into him, hands resting against his chest. "A daughter who thinks I'm magic, a partner who sees me fully, a life where the only expectations have to meet are my own." He kissed her then, not rushed or greedy, but with the certainty of someone who knew exactly what he was choosing. The sun dipped low, casting long amber shadows across the park. A breeze stirred the umbrella above the stand, and laughter from a nearby playground echoed in the distance. It was messy, ordinary, and completely perfect. 3 months later, they were married beneath a canopy of string lights in the backyard of their friend's brownstone, with Gina tossing flower petals from a basket she'd decorated herself. There were no headlines, no paparazzi. Just neighbors, friends, and the smell of grilled onions in the air. Daphne wore a simple cream dress she'd sewn herself from leftover fabric in her sketchbook stash. Jackson wore a navy suit that didn't quite fit at the shoulders, but his smile made up for it. As they exchanged vows, Gina interrupted only once to ask if Pancake could be the ring bearer. He could. That night, Jackson carried Daphne across the threshold of their new apartment above a different storefront, this one theirs. A shared studio in the back was filled with bolts of fabric and a drafting table where she now spent her mornings sketching. Gina's room had walls painted with stars and a ceiling that glowed in the dark, because according to her dreams worked better that way. And every morning, Daphne woke up tangled in warm sheets, with Jackson's hand resting over hers and the sound of the city waking just beyond the open window. She had no boardroom, no press standing outside her door. Only love. Only laughter. Only home.